What's good, team? Welcome to today's video where we're going to be learning React zero to hero, everything you need to know to develop your own phenomenal React applications. React is hands down the most popular JavaScript development framework on the face of the planet. It's used by billions of companies, and in this video we'll be learning it by building a gym application. The application looks super sleek, it will be deployed to the internet, we'll be styling it with TailwindCSS, and it's the perfect application to teach you state, componentry, JSX, props, responsive web design, React hooks, and just everything else that you need to know to build absolutely wicked React applications. This tutorial is beginner friendly. You need no prior experience. If you've never touched React before, then do not stress. It will help if you're a bit familiar with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but other than that, we'll work from the ground up. And by the end of the video, not only will you have a super slick gym application that you can use to get absolutely hench, but it'll be a project you can add to your portfolio to impress your family, your friends, prospective employers, and you'll have all the skills you could ever want to just build the coolest React projects on the face of the planet. Anywho, that's my spiel over. If you enjoy the video, smash the like and subscribe buttons. And with that said, let's dive into the code. Alright, so to dive in, we're going to start off opening up a browser of choice and coming to this website right here, which will be linked in the description down below. Additionally, we're going to open up a terminal window. I have mine open to the folder that I use to store all of my coding projects. And in here, we're just going to go ahead and copy these installation instructions for installing Tailwind CSS with Vite. Now, Vite is basically a server that serves up a React project. And so we can go ahead and just say npm create Vite at latest, name our project. So I'm going to call it swolly fit, and then it's going to be dash template, and that's going to be a React template. If we hit enter on that, it's going to do it that quickly. You might have to click Y to install some extra stuff along the way. And now what we can do is open up a Visual Studio Code window, and just over here we can hit open, navigate to our projects, so mine are all in this folder, and then we can just hit open on the new React project we have just created. So the first thing we'll do in this tutorial is discuss what exactly has been created, because there's a whole lot more files here than you would typically get with a vanilla web development project with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. The first one we'll see is the index.html. This should look like home. This is a standard HTML document that we will barely be touching. We've got a few modifications to make in here a bit later. However, the main thing to note is this div with the ID of root. Our entire React project gets rendered within this div eventually via this script, main.jsx. We can navigate to this script, and essentially it just says get the DOM, the document object model, create the root, get that div with the ID of root, and render out our app component inside. Now, the app component is going to be the hub for most of our code, and it's the file that we'll be probably working with the most, and this is where all of our React componentry will go. We've got a couple of extra files, the index.css, that's for some styling. The app.css we can delete, and we will have to remove the import from this file just right here. Other than that, we have a Vite config, a package.json, that's where we've got all of our dependencies, and the public directory, similar to the assets directory, where we can store files that we wish to serve with the project. Now, we have a few more instructions to run, so we're just going to scroll down, and I'm going to open up a terminal within VS Code. Here she is right here. And we're just going to run these commands. That's got some npm installations, node package manager. And then once that's installed, we'll run the second command, paste that in right there. That's going to initialize a file that we are now going to fill with this contents. So I think that's the tailwind.config. We're just going to paste that across. And finally, we're going to gut everything inside of our index.css for these Tailwind directives. With that, we can finally boot up our project by running npm run develop, or dev, and that's going to initialize it on a localhost 5173, port 5173. And here we can see our bare bones React app, and it's already interactive. We've got this little count here that's unstyled because we got rid of all the styles. Now, if we wanted to check if our Tailwind is working, we can just click on anything and let's go for this paragraph. And we'll say class is equal to text green 300. If we save that, we get some green text. And the first important difference to note between React and traditional development is that class is now replaced with class name. Subtle but important. The last thing we're going to do to finish the initialization of our project is install some Google fonts. You'll be wanting to head over to fonts.google.com. Link is in the description down below, and we're going to be looking up Poppins, and you will need to go through all the variants and add them all. You can see I've already got them all here. Once these are all selected, there's a little link just here. It says use on the web. We've got the link selection right there, and then after that we have a whole big link just above my head, and at the very bottom you'll see this copy button. We'll hit copy on that, and we're going to come into the index.html, and underneath the title, inside the opening and closing head tags, we'll paste in that link. That's going to allow us to use the Poppins font family in our document. We'll quickly change the name of our app to Swoley, well, let's just stick with Swolenormous. Pretty simple. That should change this name up here, which it has. And then the next thing we're just going to do is quickly come over to Font Awesome CDN 6.0. This is going to allow us to use a really cool icon set in the project. Once again, link is in the description down below, along with the link to the GitHub repository, which you should totally star because you're a legend. But if you need to compare code, that is available to you. But yeah, we'll just copy that link tag and paste that directly under our fonts right there. So with that all done, it's time to discuss React. Now, there's a lot to talk about. The first ones we're going to start with are what's known as JSX and also what a component is. Now, to start off with components, one of the coolest things about React is that code is compartmentalized into groups of related tasks. So for example, if you had a navbar element, that would be its own component. If you have a hero section, that would be its own component. If you had a grid or a series of buttons or any kind of related sections put into their own components. We can go ahead and create our own components by creating a folder inside of the source directory, and we're actually going to just make some. Now, the first one we'll need is a hero, and components in React have the .jsx extension because they contain JSX. Now we're going to initialize what is known as a React functional component, and we can do that inside Visual Studio Code by typing the RFC keys and hitting enter. As for what a component actually is, it's literally just a function that has the same name as the file of our folder. Components, the file name is always capitalized, same with the function. But the interesting thing about these functions is what they return. Here we can see what looks to be HTML code. However, the primary difference between HTML code and JSX is that JSX can have JavaScript written amongst the HTML code, which you cannot do in HTML. That's going to make development infinitely easier, but yeah, JSX essentially just refers to the returned HTML or JavaScript interactive HTML from the functional component. We'll need a few more. We're going to have one called generator.jsx. We'll do RFC again, and then we're also going to have one called workout.jsx, RFC in that. And the way we can import components into the hub of our application, we can go ahead and get rid of everything that was existing within our app before. And we come into these React fragments here. React fragments are just essentially empty divs, and we can render out our first component as if it were in fact an HTML tag, ensuring that we import it from our component section. We can now render it out, and then underneath we can render out generator, importing that, and then finally we can import workout too. And just like that, we have our three components, and you can see that the rendered content, this hero, actually gets rendered on the screen. So it gets imported and then displayed inside of our app, and then our app via this main.jsx gets rendered within this root div. But that's not really critical information. The main thing is that we render out subcomponents within the parent component, and the app is the biggest parent component. Now obviously subcomponents can have further subcomponents. For example, I could make my own custom buttons and stuff like that, and we will be doing that, just not right yet. So the next thing we're going to do is come back into our index.css and apply the font family of Poppins with a backup of sans serif. Now we'll just do that to apply the Poppins font family to absolutely everything. And if we come back, that font family has indeed updated to Poppins. And with that all done, we can get started on our application. Now I'm actually going to swap out these fragments for a main section. And I'm going to give this main a class name of min height screen, a display of flex, a flex direction of flex col, like so, not a lot. But in addition to that, I'm going to give it a background of a gradient to the right from slate 800 to slate 950, and we're also going to give it a text white, and we're going to set the default sizing to text small, and then on a small screen we're going to set the size to text base. Now we'll be styling the app as we go, just so we can really see the changes happen. Just with those, we can already see the background gradient has been updated. That was pretty straightforward. The next thing we're going to do is come into our hero section, and this is what we're trying to get. So we've got a few text elements that we'll be copying across. It looks like the first one is going to be a paragraph tag. We're just going to copy and paste that in there. It's time to get, then we're going to have an h1 tag. This is going to say swole. Enormous is going to be within a span, so we'll put that in there. The reason we do that is so that we can sub-style that blue text, as you can see right there. Underneath that, we're going to have another paragraph, and this one is going to have all of this stuff pasted just in there. And we're going to have spans around unbelievably swolenormous and mass monstrosity. So we can quickly pop them in. And mass monstrosity. Cool bananas. Now, one thing I'm just going to do is come into our index.css, and we're going to ensure that the span, sometimes they can be a bit fiddly with the font weights and the font family. So we're just going to make sure that the font family is set to inherit, and the font weight is set to inherit. So if we set anything on the parent, it will be inherited by the child element. As for the div, this is also going to have a class name of min height screen, a display of flex, a flex direction of column. We'll give it a gap of maybe 10. We're going to say item center, and we're also going to say justify center. So that's just going to center all of the content in the middle of our page. If we come back to our own application, this is what we're looking at. Obviously this one is a bit different. The next thing we'll be doing is we'll style, I think first we should do the swolenormous. So this is going to have a class of uppercase. Be interested to see if yeah, it gets applied to the whole thing. That's perfect. We're going to say font weight of bold, and we'll say text 5XL on a small breakpoint. We'll go up to a 6XL on a medium breakpoint. We'll go up to a 7XL. And on a large breakpoint, we'll go up to a text 8 extra large, which is going to be mighty great. And to be fair, I think we might change that to a semi-bold, and we might drop these all down 1, just because that was quite extreme. Getting ahead of myself. After that, for the paragraph, we're going to give this a class of text small until a medium screen. Then we'll say text base. We're going to say font weight of light. And then in both spans, we can select them both and give them both class names of text blue 400 in a font of medium. That's going to set the font weight to be a little bit larger. In addition to selecting the span right here and giving that a class of text blue 400, there's our it's time to get swell enormous. I hereby acknowledge. For everything inside of this, we're going to set the text to center, and I'm also just going to wrap these first two elements inside their own div and give them a class of flex direction of column and a gap of 4, just so they sit a bit closer together. It's time to get swell enormous. And then at the very bottom of this, we can have a button, and the button is going to have a class of p padding x laterally of maybe 8, a padding y of 4. We'll say rounded medium, and in here we're going to say accept and begin, and I'm going to ensure that I wrap that inside of a paragraph tag because it's a text element, like so. So we should have that little button come up on the screen. We can't see much yet, but we will in a minute. The last thing I want to do, we obviously don't want our page stretching out infinitely, is inside of this element I'm going to set a max width of, I reckon, 900 pixels. So to do a custom table amount, we do 900 pixels inside of the square parentheses. And then I'm going to set the width to full as well, in addition to giving a margin X of auto. So that should just prevent our page from becoming too wide. 900's probably still too much. I'll go for an 800. And I think that's pretty good. For the button, we'll just give that a border of border blue and a border, blue 400, sorry, and then a border of solid. And we should see that come up. We could possibly make it a border 2. And we're also going to give it a background of slate 950, and we're going to give it an extra class called blue shadow. Now, blue shadow is a custom class that we're going to make inside of our index.css, and so we can just target it using the period, and that's going to be a box shadow of 3 pixels, 3 pixels, 0, 0, and then a hash 60A5FA, and we're going to add a hover amount, so blue shadow on the hover event. We're going to change that to a 6 and a 6, but we're also going to add a transform of translate -3 pixels and then -3 pixels. So what this is going to do on our screen is currently misbehave, and that's because I forgot a secondary minus. So if we minus that, our button has this kind of pop out effect. And we can add one last thing to our styling in here. We can give it a duration of 200, and now that's just going to have a slow effect just like that. So that's component 1 done. That's our main page. The other thing we'll just quickly do before we move on is give this page some padding, just a simple padding 4. Just so it doesn't touch the edges. And with that, we can move on to the second component, which is our generator. Now this one is also going to have a class of min height screen. However, since this one is going to have the same section or overall structure as the workout, we're going to create a third component called section wrapper.jsx. We can create that component, and I'm actually going to render it out inside of the generator section wrapper, ensuring that we import it. And the other thing to note is that where in our app we used self-closing components, for the generator we have the opening and closing component, or tag, I guess. The reason we're doing that is because we want children content within this section right here, essentially everything that's not going to be repeated. So for example, if I type ASD, we would expect that to show up down here. However, we can see that only section wrapper shows up. So at least the section wrapper is working. we can see section wrapper displays section wrapper. And the way that we can then get the children content to display within section wrapper is via props. And we can think of props as basically a present from a parent component to a child component. There's two ways we can communicate information between them, or down from the parent to the child. And one of them is via children. So we can destructure children out from props, and then we can consequently render the children contents. And so now we can see that instead of rendering out section wrapper as it did before, it does in fact render out the children. So the children contents is just anything wrapped between the parent tags wherever it's being, the tag itself is being rendered. Now, the other thing we're going to do, which is going to be exceptionally clever, is pass down some contents via the attribute style props. So we can have, it's essentially, once again, a package from a present from the parent component to the child component. And this is going to be for some banners. So the first one we're going to have is a header. We'll call it header is equal to, and this can be a JavaScript value, and for this one it's going to be generate your workout. And then we're going to pass in a second one that's title, and this is going to be an array. And the first one is just going to say it's, the second one is going to say huge o'clock, making sure that we escape these apostrophes. And then what we can do is we can, just like we receive the children, we can destructure out the name, so we have header and title, header and title, and then we can consequently render them out in here. Now inside of this, I'm going to swap out this div for a section, and the section is going to have a class of a class name of min height screen, flex col, and maybe a gap of 10. Pretty straightforward. At the top we're going to have a div that's going to have a class name of background slate 950, a padding y of 10, a display of flex, also flex col, a gap of 4, and we're going to justify it centrally and put the align it center, so items center. Inside of the div, this is going to have a paragraph tag which has the header, and then underneath that we're going to have an h2 tag, and for this one we're going to have title 0 space title 1 space title 2. Now the reason I'm doing that is so that I can put the central title inside of a span so that we can color it differently and give it some extra styles. But if I paste that, we can see that that's showing up there just the way that we would like it to. I might drop this gap down to a 2, and then under that div we can then render out the children. For the paragraph, it's going to have a class of uppercase, like so, and I might also give it a font of medium. And then for it's huge o'clock, the span can have a class of uppercase and text blue 400, and the whole h2 can have a class of font semi-bold, a text 3XL, small text 4XL, medium text 5XL, and large text 6 extra large. The font semi-bold should not have that in between it, and so there we can see it come up right there. It's huge o'clock, just how we want it. So that's going to be the banner at the top of the section. And now we can go back into generator. Now for this section we're going to create a new folder inside of source called utils, and in here we're going to create a file called swolger.js. Now this is just a JavaScript file, and this file is going to contain hundreds and hundreds of exercises that I literally wrote out by hand. So it took ages, and you can copy this from the GitHub repo. And once again, you should totally star it because this took time. It's got all of the information, descriptions, everything we could possibly want. The reason we are going to do this is because it's got all the different styles of workouts in addition to the exercises. We've got training schemes, tempos, all that good stuff, and you can just go ahead and copy that across. Now inside of the generator, we're also going to have some repeated code at the start of each section. You can see how this is similar to this, as much as the selection options might be different. And instead of creating a new component in a separate file, I'm actually just going to create a new component up here, and this is just going to be a header, very simply, and this is just going to return the div, and inside of the div we're going to have another div, and this is going to have an index that'll get passed down. So inside of the props we'll pass down an index. We'll see how this works in a second, in addition to the title and the description. So once again, all of the repeated units. So in here I can have an h4, and that can have the title. Above that we can have a paragraph. This is going to have the index, and then beneath that we can have another paragraph that's going to have the description. Now we can go ahead and render out header. We don't have to import it because it's right there, and we can pass in the index. The first one's going to be 1. I'm actually going to pass that in as a string, 0, 1. The title is going to be equal to pick your poison, and the description is going to be equal to select the workout you wish to endure, full stop. That can be a self-closing element, and we should see that show up in our application. It totally does. Excellent, absolutely brilliant. I'm going to come back to the section wrapper and just put it inside of a div right here. This div is going to have a class of max width of 800 pixels, a width of full, a display of flex, a flex direction of column, and a margin X of auto, in addition to that gap of 10. It's going to stop everything from getting too wide. Now for this one, this is going to have a class of flex col, a gap of maybe 4. This one is going to have a class of flex, we're going to say items end, actually no, items center, and also maybe a gap of 2. For the paragraph tag, this is going to have a class of text 3XL on a small screen, a text 4XL, and a medium text 5XL. We'll give it a font of semi-bold and a text of slate 400. That should make it look kind of big. For the pick your poison, this is going to have a class name of text large. On a small, we'll go to a text 2XL, and a medium a text 3XL. It's going to bump that up a bit. Pick your poison right there. That should just be items center, not centers. And for the description, we can give that a class of text small. On a small screen, we'll go to a text size of base, and then an MX of auto. Very easy. We'll text center the whole thing. So in this one, I'm actually just going to say justify center as well. That pushes it all into the middle. And I might actually just give this a minimum size of text extra large instead, so it's a bit bigger. Cool. Underneath that, we can come back in here and have a special section. So this section is going to be some buttons. If we look in here, we have 4 of the same button. Now, we're not going to write out the same button code, and as much as we could actually use a component to duplicate that, we'd still end up with 4 rendering of that component. So instead, what we're going to do is map out the different workouts that you can do. So here we have individual, bro split, bodybuilder split, or upper and lower. So the way that we can do that is map it out. We need to get an array. So if we get all the keys of our workouts, I think is what it is. Is that workouts? Yeah, it is. That's going to give us an array with these 4 elements. Once we have the array, we can map over it, where a map goes over every entry and returns something related to each entry. So in here we can have the type and the type index, we can open that up inside of an arrow function, and we can return a div. Well, actually, it's going to be a button, isn't it? We'll return a button that has the type. So we'll have a paragraph, and inside of that, we'll enter the type. Now, we only have to write this code once, and it will create 4 buttons, one for each type. The key thing is with the map, whenever you render content like this, you have to give the parent element within the return statement a key that is unique. So I like getting the index of the key because there's only one instance of each index. So if we render that out, we can see we actually have 4 buttons. The formatting is not great, but that's something we can deal with in a second by adding a div just in here. This can have a class of flex item center. I lie, actually. We're going to say a class of grid calls 2 until we get to a small screen. Then we're going to say grid calls 4, and we'll have a gap of 4. And we will just wrap these 4 buttons that get returned from this map statement. Now we can kind of see it showing up a little bit. And now we can individually style the button and give it a class of background slate 950, a border blue 400, a padding Y of 4, and a rounded of large. So there's our buttons. We can see them, drops into columns when we need it to. And the other thing I'm going to do is drop that to a 3, I think. Padding Y of 3. And likewise with the section wrapper component, we're also going to want to come up to the parent section and give it a, this div down here, a padding of 4. So that will just be P4. That will make everything sit in a bit. Likewise with this element, we should also give that a padding of 4. So there's our 4 buttons. We want to add some hover effects to them, so we'll just say duration of 200, and on hover we can set the border to blue 600. So now when we hover, we can see that the border goes darker. Pretty simple. The other thing is that we have some pretty weird text formatting in here, so I'm going to give this paragraph a class of capitalize. And then because we can do JavaScript inside of the JSX, I'm just going to say type.replace all, and we're going to replace any underscores with space. And once again, that's within the curly braces because it's a JavaScript element. So now we can see that bodybuilder split or bro split sit apart. So that's one down. We're going to go ahead and duplicate this whole section. So I have a new header. The second one is going to be 02. The title is going to be lock on targets, and the description will be select the muscles judged for annihilation, full stop. This one's going to have a slightly different section here, so we can go ahead and delete all of that. For now, what we're going to do is we'll have a div, and this is going to have a paragraph that says select muscle groups, and we're also going to have an icon. So because we imported Font Awesome icons, we can come over to Font Awesome. You'll just want to hit icons up here, and then we can look for down, and within down we can find the caret down, and we can copy this code snippet. Once copied, we can paste it after the div right here. The class has to be updated to class name, and now if I save that, we can see that we have the down caret right there. So that's good. For that section, what we're going to do is once again have the background slate 950, padding Y of 3, and the border solid, border blue 400, in addition to the rounded large. So that's going to make this section look all pretty. I'm going to make it a padding 3 in general, so that will be surrounding the whole thing. For this element, I'm going to give it an absolute, a right of 3, a top of half minus translate y half to place it over the right hand side. However, for that to work, we have to ensure that the parent element has a class of relative, and we'll give that a flex item center justify center. So you can't see it, but over the far side you can see that caret show up right there, letting them know that that's going to be a drop down. Now after this, what we're going to do is have a super neat conditional rendering section, and so we can come up to the top inside of the generator function and say let show modal equal false. Now show modal is going to drop down, we can see an example here. If I hit individual, we can drop down and select the muscle groups. So we want to be able to click on this section, and then when show modal is true, so if show modal is true, we can use what's known as the short circuit operator, and then we can render out a div, and for the minute it could just say modal in the middle, modal. So if we come back to our application, currently there's nothing there, we just see workout in the bottom corner. However, if I change show modal to true, now we can see that modal does indeed show up. So now that we have that conditional rendering working in our favor, we can see the modal showing up there. What we would expect to happen is if we set this to false again, it goes away, and we should be able to click on this section here and have it show up. Now that section is this one right here. We're going to change it to be a button like so, and I'm actually going to move this padding 3 into this element specifically. So it won't look any different, but we'll see why momentarily. And I'm also just going to give this element up top a display of flex and flex column. So now that is back to looking exactly how it was. We've got the cursor pointer, and we can now add an on-click event to this item right here, and it can just say, perhaps we'll say toggle modal, modal. So we can come up here and create a function, toggle modal, open that up, and that should just say show modal is equal to not, or the inverse of whatever Boolean state show modal currently is. So now we would expect when I click on this for that to be happening. However, it's not. And the reason it's not reacting the way that we want is because changing a variable doesn't repaint the screen and update everything going on the screen. To get that to happen, and essentially how you handle anything interactive in React, use what's known as useState. So the first thing we have to do is import useState up the top of our application right there. So we import useState, and anything that we expect the user to interact with, for example, the toggling of the modal, instead of defining these variables as we traditionally would, we instead define them as React stateful variables. So we would say const, and then we use these square parentheses, and we enter in the name of the variable, show modal. There is a second element to this array, and it's set followed by whatever the name of the variable is. So in this case, it's going to be called set show modal, and that's going to be equal to useState. We call it as a function. This is a React hook, and we provide an optional default value. So I'm going to set the default to false. Now I'm just going to comment out this line, and we have to update this function. So instead of reassigning it, we now call the setter function and pass in the new value. So these changes right here have changed show modal from being a traditional variable to a React stateful variable, which means that we can now interact with it and it will repaint the screen. Lo and behold, our clicking now works perfectly. Now, you can absolutely still use regular variables in React. Once again, whenever we expect to be interacting with the value and consequently changing something on the screen, we use a stateful variable instead. And for constant values that don't really change, we can use traditional variables. Now, while we're actually defining state, all of these buttons are going to have their values or the clicked value occupied as a state. So I'm going to define a new state. This one's going to be const poison, set poison is equal to use state, and the default value for this one is going to be individual. So the first one. The second one is going to be for the muscle groups. So I'm just going to call this one muscles and set muscles. And this one is going to have a default value of an array. And then I'm going to have a third one that's const goals and set goals. And that's going to have a default value of which one? I reckon has to be one of these. So I'm going to default it to strength and power. So we're just going to copy that and paste that in as the default value. So now we have 3 stateful variables, and with that we can actually go ahead and create the last selection. So that's just going to be another header plus the buttons that follow. We're going to paste that underneath this div right here. And instead of having object.keys workouts, this one is going to just be object.keys schemes like that. And I'm going to change this to say scheme and scheme index. And then we will also update the values. So the key takes the new key and the value is the type, just like that. So now we can see that shows up down here. The primary difference is that this is a grid layout, and we're just going to set it to a default of grid cols 3 and not have an update to grid cols 4. So now we have these buttons. So that's pretty much everything we need to select our workout. Our modal doesn't work just yet, but for the minute we're going to go ahead and just update this to 03. That should say become Juggernaut, like so. That would actually be a pretty cool app name. And then after this we're going to type in here, select your ultimate objective, followed by a period. So that's going to update this last one, become Juggernaut. And now what we want to do is add some on-click events to these buttons. Pretty straightforward, on-click, and we're just going to use an anonymous arrow function. And the reason we do this is because if you look at the modal example, here we directly assigned the function. If we were instead to call the function like that, it would instead break our whole application, and because it would call this when the page is actually painted. So if we instead want to avoid that, we call our set state from within an anonymous arrow function and everything stays happy. So this one's going to be set poison, and we're just going to assign the type, which is the type of workout. What we could actually do is give this some dynamic styling. So we can select this class name in squiggly parentheses, curly parentheses, and we can add on it type is equal to poison question mark, and have some conditional styles. So if true, apply these styles. If false, apply these styles. And what we can just do is we can set the border to blue 400 in the case where it's not clicked, and we can set the border blue 600 permanently in the case that it is clicked. So now what will happen is we can see individual is default selected, and as we now select them, the styles update as the state changes. So we can just maintain a selected state. Now we want to do the exact same thing for strength and power. So what I'm actually going to do is just copy this map, because we have updated the styles, and displace the one down here. And I'm going to, well, actually even better than that, we can just copy the returned button instead. That way we don't have to do everything again. And all I'm going to do is update some values. So scheme replaces the index, and wherever it says type, it goes to scheme. So now that's all working. However, we have to update the set state. So this is going to say set goals equal to scheme. So now I can refresh the page, and we should have strength and power being the default, but we also have to make sure that scheme matches goals. I guess that should be set goal, singular, set goal. So I'll just modify that real quick. and come down here and remove the S's as well. That should just be goal. And that should just be goal. So now we have individual as the default selection. We can change it, and we have strength and power as the default selection, but we can change that too. As for our modal, what we want to do is in this section here, I want to have a class of flex col, and in here, what I want to do is map over all of the options dependent on what is selected. I might also give this a padding of 3 just to match the header, or at least a padding X and a padding bottom of 3. In here we can say, so we're going to be accessing the workouts and then the specific poison, keeping in mind that these are the poisons. So it's going to be workouts. However, we have to turn it into an array. If we want to map, note that individual returns an array, however the rest of them do not. So we're going to need to be a little bit smarter. So we're going to say, if poison is equal to individual, question mark, then we want to just return workouts for that poison. Otherwise, we want to return, it's going to be these ones. So it's going to be object.keys workouts of the poison. And now we're going to wrap that whole conditional statement inside of circular parentheses, and then we can map over whatever array is evaluated from that, be it workouts or poison or the object.keys version. And in here we can say muscle group and muscle group index, and then after that we can return an arrow function, and from here we can return a button that has a paragraph which contains the muscle group. Keeping in mind that we have to have the unique key, which is once again why I got the muscle group index. That's going to be our unique key. So now we can see the muscle groups do indeed come up, which is perfect. And I'm once again going to give this the class of uppercase. And we're also going to say dot replace all any underscores with spaces. So now that's all uppercase. We actually want that to be. Honestly, I don't even mind having it like that. And I'm just going to say on the button, I'm going to give it a class of hover text blue 400 and a duration of 200. So now when we hover, we can see the color changes. And likewise, what we want to do is on click, we want to have a function. So we're going to pass in a function. I'm actually going to define it up here. So it's going to be a function. We're going to say update muscles. And in it, we're going to pass in the muscle group. And we're going to have a couple of statements. We're going to say if muscles.length is greater than 3, actually greater than 2, we're just going to return, simply because we want to have a guard clause and we don't want them to be able to train too many muscles. That's going to be overwhelming. Then we're going to say if if poison is equal to individual, well, actually better said, not equal to individual, then we're going to just say set muscles is equal to an array that contains the muscle group. And we're going to return after this. Having these guard clauses and structuring it like this prevents us from having nested if-else statements, which is just much neater. And then if it's neither of the above two, what we're going to do is we're going to say if muscles.includes muscle group. That means that we've got a type of individual and the muscle is already included. So we want to set muscles equal to muscles.filter. The second click is always to remove it. So we're going to take the value. I'm going to say val is not equal to muscle group. So we're essentially just going to set muscles to an array that filters out the muscle group that we've just clicked on to remove it. Then we'll return from that. And otherwise, we're just going to set muscles. We're going to spread the current value of muscles, and then we're going to add the muscle group. So I know that was a bit complicated, but it looks pretty tidy. So now we can come down into our little muscle groups, and what we can do is have some conditional styling once again, and we can just say plus muscles dot includes muscle group question mark. If it does, we have some styling. If it doesn't, if it does, we can set text blue 400, and we have to now assign the function. So in here we can just call update muscles and pass in the muscle group. So now we can see that whenever I click one, it updates the value, and if I go up to individual, then our muscle groups show all of these, and we can click up to 3. Well, actually it's only allowing us to click 2, and it looks like our filter is not working either. So let's just quickly check in with that. The first thing I'm going to do is say greater than 3. And the mistake that's happening is we need to be able to run this clause first. So if muscles includes muscle group set muscles, that's actually the first clause. Otherwise our removal logic won't work. So if we come down in here, I can add a third one, then I can remove it, and I can unselect all of them and select a new 3. So that's pretty nifty. For all the other thing we'll do for all the instances where we aren't setting numerous muscle groups, we're just going to say set show modal, set that equal to false. What this will do, if I have a bro split and I hit one, it's going to close it by default. And for this case just here, I'm going to say if muscles.length is equal to, well actually, equal to 3, then we're likewise just going to set show modal false. So now what will happen is if I go back to the individual and start picking through muscle groups, when I hit the third one, it's going to close it because that's all we're allowed. Now the last thing we can do that's super cool is we can come down to this section right here, and we can wrap it in some curly parentheses for some conditional rendering. And we're just going to say muscles.length equals 0 question mark. If it is, we'll return that statement. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll return muscles.join with a space. And we're also going to make sure that this has a class of capitalize. So now we can see I've got a few of them, which is pretty complicated. That's because when I go up here, I need to actually reset it. So we just want to make sure that when we set a new poison, we set muscles equal to a blank array. So now when I go to bro split, it resets. When I click on bro split, it shows push, so that's pretty cool. When I click on this, we can get shoulders. And when I go to individual, we can select numerous muscle groups. And it's allowing me to have 4 now, which is not what I wanted. So let's bring that down to a 3 again. Sorry, a 2. So if I just reset that, triceps, chest, and back, and it's not, maybe that should be a 2. So let's try that once more. Individual, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's working. And then if I remove one and add another one, so that's going to close. So this workout could be biceps, chest, and shoulders, and it's a strength and power. Now at the very bottom, we're going to want a button, and the button we're going to use is actually the same as our very first button. So repeated code, we're thinking component. So we're going to have button.jsx. We're going to RFC that bad boy, and we're just going to copy that, paste it right in here. And for this text, we're going to instead replace it with some curly parentheses, and the props is going to be we're going to destructure the button text out from the props. So that's going to be the name that we assign to the variable. And now what we can do is just call the button, ensuring that it gets imported up the top. We can pass in the text, which is accept and begin, and we can just close the button. Happy days. So our first button still works, accept and begin, and now we can reuse this button inside of our new component at the bottom of generator, underneath all of these sections, and the text can say formulate, and we just want that to be within the wrapper, and we have to make sure that we import it. So now we have our new button, formulate, and the other thing I'm going to do is just give it some MX Auto styling so that it always self-centers in the middle of the page and only takes up a certain amount of width. So that's looking pretty neat. It's still super responsive, which is nice. The only thing I want to add is in the generator section for these buttons, here and above, so this button as well, I just want to add a padding X of 4 and a padding X of 4 on this one as well, just to tidy it up a bit. Strength, power, growth, hypertrophy, cardiovascular, and endurance. So now we can actually start formulating some workouts. In here, inside of the utils folder, I'm going to create a new file called functions.javascript. This is going to have a function called generate workout, and it's not a React component, so it's just going to be lowercase, and I'm going to make sure that's exported so that I can access it in different components. Now, this is going to be a mighty great function that's going to take all of the information in generator and build it into a workout from the workouts that we have. However, the one thing that we need is we actually need to create the workout in this component. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const workout and set workout is equal to use state, and I'm just going to have it as a null value for the minute. And the other thing I'm going to do is actually only conditionally render workout. So I'm going to say if workout exists, only then do we actually render out a workout, because there's no point in rendering it out if we don't have one. Now, we're defining the workout in here so that we can pass it down into the workout component. That's where we're going to eventually display it. So we could come into this and just, we can say props, and we can destructure out the workout from the props pretty simply. However, the one complicated thing is that to actually create the workout in the app level up here, we somehow need access to all of these different preferences that we set down in here. And there's no way to actually pass state up through components. You can only pass it down. So what we instead need to do is set these states in the higher level component where we always have access to them, and actually pass them down instead of defining them in the generator component itself. So all we have to do for that is we just pass them all down. Poison set poison is equal to set poison. And I'm just going to format this so it looks a little bit nicer. The next one is muscles is equal to muscles. Then we have set muscles is equal to set muscles. And goal is equal to goal, and set goal is equal to set goal. So as I said before, we're doing this so that we can instead have access to all of these values in our top level component, the app, which is where we will need that information in order to generate our workout. So if we save that, that's all passed down. Now we have to destructure out these values, otherwise this component is going to be rather unhappy. So we can destructure muscles and set muscles. We can destructure poison and set poison. And we can destructure goal and set goal from props. And our application is now still working perfectly functionally. The only change is that we have all this information up here, which is super legit. And that's going to allow us to create the function, which is update workout. Update workout is basically going to say let new workout equal to the function that we're returning from here. So we're going to call generate workout. We're going to make sure that we import generate workout up here. We're going to pass in some arguments to this function. So we're going to pass in poison, muscles, and goal. And then we're going to say set workout is equal to new workout. We're also going to have to pass this function down. But the other thing I'm just going to do is add in a quick little guard clause that says, if not muscles, oh, well, actually better said, if muscles is an array. So let's just say, if muscles.length is less than 1, so if it's equal to 0, we don't want to actually do anything because we don't have any muscles to train. But now we can additionally pass this function down to the generator, because this is where the formulate button is. So we can just pass that down, come into our generator, destructure it, and consequently assign it to our formulate button just here. So I could say function is equal to update workout. We're going to use a generic term, and inside of our button I can destructure function out, and I can assign that as the onClick event to happen. So in this particular case, we've actually passed this function through a couple of different states. It's assumed some different names, and we can prove that it works by coming into functions, and in here I can console.log hi mum, and if we open up our browser, inspect, go to the console, and click through some stuff. So let's go bodybuilder split. I'll do a back workout and hit that. We can see that function does in fact get called, which is perfect. Looks like we've got some overflowing text, and the way that I'm going to resolve the overflowing text is actually by coming into our generator, and down the bottom, instead of having grid cols 3, well, I guess we're going to keep it. We're just going to go grid cols 1 until the small screen, then we'll go up to a 3. So it just means that these ones are going to exist vertically until we jump up the screen size and it fits like that, which I think is just a nicer mobile layout. So we've established that our function now works. We can go ahead and pass in all of our information. So I'm just going to call this args, and we can destructure out const muscles, poison, and goal from args. So for this particular file here, I would once again recommend copying it from the GitHub code, just because it is a lot of complicated stuff that isn't really related to React. And it's basically just an algorithm developed to pull really good workout combinations from these exercises based on the inputs. But with that done, and if you copy and paste this in here, we can go ahead and call that generate function right there, and we should be able to console.log new workout and set new workout. So let's just try that in our application. If we go individual and we go triceps and biceps, strength and power, and if we formulate, let's see if we got anything back. Go to the console, and the one thing we just have to quickly update is to make sure we pass these down as an object instead of just the individual arguments. And now when we hit formulate down here, you can't see it, but we formulate a workout of different exercises at the bottom. So yeah, I would just really recommend copying and pasting that across. You can go through and see if you can figure out how it works if you like. But that's going to create a new workout for us that we can go ahead and display on our screen. So that workout will get passed into our workout component right here. And so we can go ahead and start styling that accordingly. So inside of workout, the first thing we're going to do, very similar to generator, is return the section wrapper. So we can copy that across and paste it in here. And we will need to close that and consequently import the section wrapper. Now the text that we're going to have here is danger in the middle. This one is going to say zone, And you probably guessed it, the first one is going to say the. And then after this, we can make sure that we have the equals there, the danger zone, and the text is going to say welcome to. Welcome to the danger zone. So we have that showing up. We have our workout, and underneath that, we can start designing our workout layout. Now, this is actually going to be pretty easy because we can just have a div. We can give it a class of flex col, a gap of maybe 4. And in here, what we can do is say workout.map, and we can say exercise and the index, and we can just return what's going to be our exercise card. So we're going to create a component called exercise card.jsx, RFC that, and we'll expect some props, which is just going to be the workout or the exercise, better said, and we can design that accordingly. So inside of here, we can now render out exercise card, hit enter on that, and we can pass in the exercise, and we can set exercise is equal to exercise, and we can set the key equal to the unique index, which we always have to do. So if we save that and save that, we can see that we already get 4 exercise cards, which is pretty neat. Now we just need to make them look pretty. The exercise card itself is going to have a class of padding 4, a rounded of medium, a display of flex column, a gap of 4, a background of slate 950, and on small we're going to say flex wrap. Inside of here we're going to have another div. This is going to have a class of flex column, but on a small it's going to have a flex row. We're going to say on small breakpoints and above item center, and on small breakpoint and above we'll say flex wrap as well, and we'll give that a gap x of 4. And in here we're going to have an h4. This is going to have a class name of text 3xl hidden until the small screen where it will be in line. On the small we're going to say text 4xl, medium's going to be text 5 extra large, font of semi bold, and a text of slate 400. In here we're going to render out a 0 and then the index plus 1. Currently we're not passing down the index, but we want to, because that's going to allow the user to track how many of the exercises they've done. So we'll just create a new one. Index is equal to I. We'll save that. And then adjacent here we can just have the h2. This is going to contain exercise.name.replace all, and we're just going to replace any underscores with a space. And we can come over here and give this a class of capitalize. White space is going to be no wrap. Truncate if need be. A max width of full. Text large. On a small screen we're going to go text extra large. Medium we're going to go text 2xl. We'll give it a flex of 1. And on a medium screen we'll text center it. Finally, after that we're going to have a paragraph tag. This is going to have a class of text small. Text slate 400 and capitalize. The paragraph tag is going to have exercise.type in there, and that's going to be enough for that div. Underneath that, well, we should actually be able to see it pop up. So here we can see the start of our little workout card. 0 nan is not good. I plus 1. Let's see what's happening there. Sorry, that should just be I. So now we're getting the type, the name, and all that good information. This should actually be text center, which it is on a larger screen, so that's all good. But I might actually make it so that happens on a small screen. So as soon as we get that other one come up, it should center itself as it does, and then it gets larger. So underneath this div, we're going to have another one. It's going to have a class of flex col. Then we're going to have an h3. This is going to say muscle groups. And in here, we're going to have a paragraph that just contains the exercise.muscles.join. And we're going to join them by a space, then the ampersand and another space. The h3 is going to have a class of text slate 400 text small, and the paragraph is going to have a class of capitalize. Underneath that div, we'll have another one. This one is going to have a div of grid cols 2 until we get to a small screen, then we'll bump it up to a grid cols 4. We'll, on a small screen, say place items center, above a small breakpoint, and we'll give it a gap of 2. And in here, we're going to have a couple of mapped items. So we're going to have the curly parentheses, then an array. The array is going to have reps, then we're going to have rest, and then we're going to have tempo. And we'll map them out as, we'll call it info. And in here, we're going to return a div that has a class of flex col, a padding of 2, a rounded, and then a border of a custom 1.5 pixels, border solid, and a border of slate 900, and a width of full. Inside of, we'll close that div. We also have to make sure that we give it a key. The key is going to be equal to info, since the key name is already guaranteed to be unique. This is going to have an h3 that contains some information. We're going to say if info is equal to reps, like so, then we're going to display a template literal string. So that should actually just be the backticks, double backticks. And in here, we're going to have a JavaScript value that's exercise.unit. And otherwise, we're going to have info, like so. And then beneath that, we're going to have the value associated. So that'll be a paragraph tag. And that's just going to say exercise at info. And we'll give this a class of font medium. So if we go ahead and save that, we can see the reps, rest, and tempo is showing up, which is pretty cool. If we come out, that goes over there. Looks pretty tidy. The other thing we want to do for the h3 is capitalize it and give it some classes. So we're going to say capitalize and also a text of slate 400 and a text of small. So that's going to look a little bit neater. There we can see it there. So we've got the muscle groups. We've got the exercise display, and then underneath this div, we're going to have a button. So right in here, we're going to have a button. Well, actually, this goes within the div, so this is like essentially the fourth item. This is going to have a class of flex column, a padding of 2. We'll say rounded, a border of a custom 1.5 pixels, so we use the square parentheses, a duration of 200, border solid, border blue 900. On a hover, we'll give it a border of blue 600. And then we'll say width of full and a duration of 200. In here, we're going to have an h3. It's going to have the same styling as the one above. So it'll be text slate 400, text small, and capitalize. And that's going to have sets completed. And then underneath that, we're going to have a paragraph tag that has a class of font medium. And in here, it's going to say sets completed, which doesn't exist yet, at the ith index or 0 out of 5. Now, this is a state that we're going to define. It can just be local to this component. We don't need it anywhere else. Use state, and this is just going to track the sets. So we'll say const sets completed, set sets completed is equal to use state, and we'll set it to 0 initially. I always like to define my state underneath the props. So with that done, we can come down here. Now this is going to have an interesting onClick function. So we're going to say onClick, and we're going to assign handle set increment, which is a function we can define up the top. So here we can define the function handle set increment, and all we want to do in here is say sets completed. It's going to be the current value sets completed plus 1 remainder 5. So we will remainder 5. So that way it can never get more than 5. So we'll increment it and then we'll go up to 5. So currently that value is not changing. And that can actually just be like that. So now we can see we have this incrementer where someone can just track the number of sets that they've done for. And I think that actually just needs to go to 6. So that they can have a complete set count, and we can have one for every different exercise. So you can go through and have all your different sets. And honestly, that's pretty much the whole application. The last thing we should actually just do though is make sure that the buttons take us between the sections. So in here what we're going to do is where we have the section wrapper, we're also going to render out an ID value and set the ID equal to the ID. That way when we click the function, we can actually scroll to the ID. So in the hero, here we want to provide a function to the button. So we're going to say func, that's the keyword we use. And that can be an arrow function that just says window.location.href is equal to slash, and then we'll actually just ID. It can be generate. So we can ensure that our generator has the ID equal to generate. And so when we click accept and begin, that scrolls us to the generate section. And then the other one that we want is to come into our index.css, and on everything, well, specifically on our HTML document, we just want to say scroll behavior is smooth. And so now when we accept and begin, as you can see up here, we hit accept and begin, it scrolls us down to this. We can generate a bro split of strength and power, and we can formulate that workout. And you can see that whenever I click this, we get a brand new workout. So we can continue to do everything, and it's got the reps and the sets completed and all that good stuff. But yeah, the other one we wanted to do is when we hit formulate, we want to come down. So we also have to, on the workout, provide an ID here equal to, we'll just call it workout. And then when we hit the button that's inside generator, and we have this function down here called update workout. Update workout is passed down from the main function, if we recall. Update workout is here. So after we've set the workout, then what we want to do is we want to say window.location.href is equal to workout. So now when I click formulate, it scrolls us down to the workout, and we can do that all over again. And there's actually one thing I forgot to do inside of our exercise card because I'm a muppet. It's we have to add another div just above the tracking information right here that has a div of class flex col background of slate 950 rounded, and we'll also have a gap of 2. And in here what we want to do is just say exercise.description .split, and we want to split on the triple underscore, and then we want to map over this and take the val, and in here we want to return just a div, and this div can have a class of text small, and I think on this parent we'll also give it a padding of 2 and a gap. Yeah, that's fine, cool. And so inside of here what we can do is we can just render out the val. So that's just going to give us this description right here, and I think I'm actually going to change my mind on the padding. We'll remove that. So now every exercise comes with a whole description as well. That was super important. And with that all done, it's time we deploy our web application. So what I'm going to do is commit this code to my GitHub. I'm going to add the repository. Here I'm using GitHub Desktop, but if you're using Git, then I have some good instructions for that. Choose, I'm going to select the current repository, create a GitHub repo here, initialize it with a README, and we're going to say the ultimate gym training app built with React and Tailwind CSS. Create the repository. We're going to publish it, going to keep it public. You can go and star it. That's what you'll find it under on GitHub. And from GitHub, we can come over to Netlify. We'll log in with our account. You might need to create one. Mine's associated with my GitHub. And once I'm inside, I can come here. We're going to add a new site. We're going to import from an existing project, deploy from GitHub. I'm going to have to authorize GitHub. And in here down the bottom, you can click configure the Netlify app with GitHub. We're going to do that. Scroll down to the bottom, select repositories, search for Swoley Fit, save that. And once that's saved, we can search in here, Swoley Fit, and that will show up, and we should be able to click on that. It's going to recognize that it's a React project, and we can hit deploy, and that's going to deploy our project for us. And now that that looks like it's done, we can quickly come over to site configuration and domain management. And here where we have our domain, if we click on it, it takes us to our live website. But we can go a step further, edit the site name to be swoleyfit.netlify.app, save that, and that is now our new project URL. We can come in, build a workout, individual, pick our muscle groups, the type of workout, formulate a workout, and we have it here. We can work through the sets. We've got the rest, the tempo, descriptions, and it looks cash money. And that, my friends, is pretty much the whole entire video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have learned loads about React. Should be everything you need to go and develop your own phenomenal React applications. With the project now done, I challenge you to add your own personal flair to it. It's a great way to extend your knowledge, and you've got a lot of examples of how to do absolutely everything down there. Change the colors, change the fonts, change the text, change the functionality. And once you've done that, tag me in it. Tag me in it on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'd love to see what you guys come up with. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to star the repo. And with that said, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace. Learning to code? If so, be sure to check out the Small James web development roadmap. Link is in the description down below, or dive straight in with these videos.